Welcome to the mailbag. Remember, these are questions that you guys leave on the channel. I do my humble best to try and respond to, or throw them out to the community for someone in the community to respond to. Before we start normal parish notices, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. If you want to be notified when I publish new content in the channel, hit that bell icon. Consider supporting the production of videos by supporting the channel on Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/The Music Tech Guy UK. The address will be down here. All funds received are put towards future videos and the content of the channel. And in these troubling times, in this era of coronavirus, remember, stay safe, stay at home, wash your hands, and we will all come through this crisis on the other side. One of the things I get a lot of questions about is the MX-1, the mix performer. And this question is no different. It's typical of the sort of question that comes out from the mix performer. And it's from Heleno Cardoso Santos. And they write, when I produce sound on the equipment connected to the MX-1, the sound comes out the connected monitors to the MX-1. When I record a track on the Ableton connected to the MX-1 and play this track on Ableton, I cannot hear the sound out of the monitors connected to the MX-1. Can you help me solve this problem? This is not an uncommon problem. And this was in response to the sort of classic MX-1 setting up your MX-1 video I did back in 2016. So initially I answered this, and this goes on several pieces. So initially I answered this. There are three modes. So remember, the MX-1 can be set up in one of three ways, and you kind of have to sort of make that decision on how you want to use the MX-1. Depends on how you set it up. So there is a surface mode, there is an external mix mode, and there is a mixer mode. And when the mixer is in mixer mode, it acts purely as a mixer. So channels 17 and 18, which are the channels that come from your PC, are just inputs to the mixer. Okay. When in external mixer mode, you're operating the channels as an extension of the channels in the DAW. In this mode, what you need to do is map the channels in the MX-1 to the channels in the DAW, and also map the outputs of the channels back to the channels on the MX-1. And then what you'll then be able to do is you'll then be able to play the instruments back, and it will mix through the MX-1 to the extent that the master output does not function on Ableton. You're actually doing the mixing on the MX-1. This is routing directly from the DAW, mixing on the MX-1, and then going to the outputs connected to the MX-1. When in surface mode, which is the third mode, the faders are mapped to the faders in the DAW, as are other pots, and the outputs are routed via the master. So the faders, it effectively becomes an extension of the DAW itself, in terms of what you do on the faders and the pots, etc., will change the way things are working within the DAW. So the first question I went back to this particular tuber was, are you in the right mode for what you want? So the tuber writes back, "Hi John, I signed up to Patreon. Thank you very much. Regarding the operation modes of the MX-1, I need to record in Ableton the instruments connected to the MX-1 and then play back the same recording from Ableton through the MX-1. You said we have three ways to use the MX-1. From your answer, I understand that I can use the external mixer mode to meet my need. Correct. Yes, I think external mixer mode is the right mode here, but I'll carry on with that in a sec. Being correct, what are the procedures for making the settings in the MX-1 and Ableton in the external mixer mode? In addition, I had the following setup. A Roland MX-1 in which I have connected a Uno synthesizer, a Yamaha PSR E463 keyboard, a Roland drum machine TR-8S. Now I want a TR-8S, I have to be honest. Monitors, iPad, and a notebook with Ableton 10 Live with Windows 10. So, again, further response here. Unfortunately, and I have to be honest and say, at the moment, because of the circumstances and the fact that I packed my studio up, most of my equipment, although there is a degree of equipment that creeped down here before we all became locked down, but most of my equipment is currently now in a secure storage site, and I can't get to it because I can't go there because we're not allowed to move around in the UK. So I can't. Otherwise, I would do a video to actually show you how to do this. So it's kind of a bit of a wordy thing rather than a video-y thing. Yes, I agree. Putting the MX-1 into external mode is the right thing to do. The thing you'll need to remember is that the MX-1 will pass the signal from the MX-1 into the computer dry. Okay, and hopefully, if I've done it right, there should be a routing diagram that appears up here that shows you how Roland have configured the MX-1, and you can see that if you operate in anything other than mixer mode, you bypass on the way into the computer all the effects. Okay, so that's what I mean by dry. So any effects that you want on the signal, on the channel itself, you'll have to put on in Ableton. So you'll have to put a plug-in onto the channel, and you'll have to put your effects in there rather than running the effects from the MX-1. Because on the way out, it will pick up the effects of the MX-1, but they won't be on the signal coming from Ableton. So remember that. This is a really key point, and a lot of people ask me the same question. So, how do you make this thing work? So, firstly, what we need to do is make sure your MX-1 is running at least firmware version 1.4 and above. And there is a video link, which will probably be up there somewhere, that shows you where the video I did that shows you how to check your firmware is. If you need to upgrade that, I did a video about upgrading as well. So again, I will try and put a link somewhere that shows you where it is. Of course, you will need to also make sure that you've got the drivers on your Windows 10 machine to make this happen, because the MX-1 is not class compliant, so therefore you can't just plug and play it. You have to download drivers to the machine. And although I haven't done it on my Windows 10 machine, there is a video about how to do it on the Mac, and again, I'll throw that up here as well. So now you've got all those bits and bobs. The next thing you need to do is go to the Roland website and grab anything you need, because it's all on the Roland website, so don't worry about that too much. Now, I don't know very much about the Uno synthesizer, and I don't know very much about the Yamaha PSR E463 keyboards that you've stated in the reply. So I did a bit of digging this morning, and according to the Yamaha website and the specifications, it states that it will transmit and receive USB audio and MIDI data down the USB. So to my mind, this actually is probably better routed via the computer rather than via the MX-1. Although you could put audio into 1/2 of the inputs on the MX-1 and route them back into the computer. But to my mind, it's probably better to actually route this into the computer using USB and then pump that channel out from the computer. So basically what you would do on the computer is you select the input would be the actual instrument itself, and the output would be the MX-1 channel on that Ableton channel. Okay. And similar for the IK Media Uno Synth, which I also looked up this morning. Again, it also claims to be able to route audio and MIDI data down the USB cable, so it's a similar setup. And while I'm talking, there should be, again, a rough idea of how this setup might look. And what I've done is I've put the audio options in there, although I don't believe you really need the audio options. I think you can do everything via USB into the computer and then out from the computer to the MX-1 to your PA. Now, the bit to make Ableton work, and what I did again is I've gone back and had a look at the Roland website this morning. And Roland have actually, I say recently, probably since the last time I looked at the Roland website about this stuff, I've actually published a document about running the mixer in external mode with Ableton and all the setup parameters you need to do in Ableton. I can't explain it better than the documentation. So what I'm going to do is I will put a link down here somewhere that takes you to that particular page on the Roland website, and you can download that particular document. And if you follow that, then theoretically, once you've done all that, everything should work for you. So let me know how you get on. So another fairly long question and answer, this one. It's from Ryan B, relating to what the hell is ZenCore I did in October last year, October 2019. And he writes, so ZenCore technology is the same type of virtual analog used by M Audio Venom synth. Now, I don't know the Venom synths, and that will become obvious as we go through this. The Venom uses sampled oscillators and applies virtual analog filters and such to the sampled oscillator. This was heavily criticised as not being true virtual analog, but some say that it's actually more accurate sounding than most VA synths because the VA algorithm is most VA synths often not accurate, rather was a marketing scam. So what basically he's trying to say here is a lot of VA synths, basically the way they sampled the sound that was actually used in the synthesizer in a lot of instances wasn't particularly a great sample. So, you know, you sort of buy into the whole sort of virtual analog sort of scenario, and actually what you get is you get something that's been digitally manipulated. So, you know, I put my hands up and say, look, I've never owned a M Audio Venom, and not delved into the mechanism of synthesis. So normally when I buy a synthesizer, I will delve into the mechanism of how the synthesis works, because I haven't owned one, I've not really looked at it. The ZenCore engine samples the basic tone, which is then available for manipulation, but basically the mechanism is very similar. So what I'm saying here is that it's a very similar concept, although how M Audio have done it on the Venom and how Roland done it on ZenCore is different. You're right, the basis of synthesis using the ZenCore was called LA synthesis back in the day. Well, you know, if we go back and look at how the D50 and the D series were all sort of stood up and worked, they were worked on this sort of, you know, you sampled the attack and the attack portion of the tone and maybe part of the sustain, and then the other elements of the tone generation, effectively the sort of decay and the envelope and that sort of stuff, they were things that you could then graft onto the tone to give it its unique characteristics, which is where the LA synthesis comes in. So, you know, that was what it was back in the time. So Ryan has then written back, my understanding of the D50 LA synthesis is it combines very short PCM samples, exactly that, mainly of attack stage of acoustic instruments along with analog or virtual analog synthesis. Espencraft, please go over to Espen's channel because he does a lot of stuff on this. Interesting video about the D50 where he describes it as an analog or virtual analog synth. This is where I get my understanding of LA synthesis from. The M Audio Venom differs in that the oscillators of the old synths and such were sampled, and these samples are used instead of model oscillators. So again, going back to the concept is the same, with this initial piece being a sample rather than actually generated by the machine itself. And what he's referring to is the models, where you have a modelled oscillator, you have, like ACB for argument's sake, ACB models the generation of the tone. The M Audio differs in the oscillators of old synths were sampled, and these were used instead of model oscillators. These sampled oscillators then pass through a virtual analog synthesis process, modelled filters, etc. The reason they didn't get use modelled oscillators is because the engineers believed modelled oscillators were not accurate and that samples would yield a much more authentic replication, similar to what LA did, and probably what ZenCore is now doing, to be honest. I must say that M Audio does have a very authentic vintage analog sound, which is not all other which is somehow more authentic in some way than not all other VA synthesis I've heard. If only it didn't require a software editor program, the array of samples, oscillators and model filters, etc. to choose from is stunning. So again, my response. Yes, you are correct. The attack section of the sound is effectively driven from a PCM. For those who don't know, that's pulse code modulation for those synth geeks out there. Sample, and then the rest of the tone is generated digitally by the synth through the parameters that you enter. When I said similar, I was referring to the fact that the basic tone is sampled and the rest of the tone is generated by the synth. Good reply, though. And Ryan's then gone on further on to say, thanks. To be clear, I was never negating anything you said, but I'm merely making a conversation. After my last reply, I was researching the D50 and LA synthesis and discovered not only are the sample attacks transient used, but also the samples of the sustain portion. If understood, I read this correctly, this includes samples of other synths oscillators. These can be combined with the subtractive synthesis engine, or the subtractive synthesis engine can be used alone without any samples. If I understand that correctly, the D50 and related synths are capable of generating a basic synth oscillator signal without using a sample. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check that, to be honest. I think he's right, but because I haven't got any of my D-series stuff down here, I can't check it. By the way, I must say that the M Audio Venom does have a very authentic vintage sound. It tends to sound very lo-fi, thin and harsh as opposed to warm, rich and hi-fi. But this is where it really shines brighter than most VA synths. It is capable of generating warm and rich sounds, but even then it tends to have a lo-fi sound. This is probably due to the fact that there is a hiss and some distortion, harmonic and inharmonic distortion in the oscillator samples. The hiss is some of the oscillator samples, sampled from older vintage synthesizers, is very audible in some of the presets. The synth itself also seems to have a low SN ratio, in my opinion, sound to noise ratio, that is. That must just be the mic or line in circuit. IDK, it's a noisy synth but was designed to be noisy. Anyway, it's an amazing synth, very expressive too, although that's probably just well chosen velocity curves. It literally brings tears to my eyes sometimes, because it makes me feel as though I have been reunited with some lost loved ones. Sorry if I sound like I'm promoting the Venom, but I'm only saying sampled oscillators can be better than model oscillators if done right. The problem with sampling oscillators is capturing the subtle chaos of the actual oscillator. An analog oscillator is alive and always changing in subtle ways. Oscillators are modelled partly to replicate this aspect of the synth. The Venom somehow replicates these characteristics of the oscillator despite using samples, or so I've heard. I don't remember how. Multi-samples perhaps, but not only multi-samples. So the Venom sounds like an interesting synthesizer that I haven't really come across, I have to be honest. So, but basically, I think when there's enough money in the Patreon kitty, maybe the Venom synthesizer might be something to apply funds to do some more videos for the channel on that particular synth. Anyway, Ryan, thanks for the well-informed comment. It's well worthy of including in the mailbag. John. Next one comes from someone called Cloud Run, and he says, "What would you suggest is a fair price for one today in very good condition?" So this was in response to the FB-01, a quick review I did in 2015. So FB-01s. Now, FB-01s are very underrated, I have to be honest and say. People kind of overlook FB-01s, but they are built on the same technology base as a DX7. They only have 4 oscillators, though. So personally, I would be looking to pay somewhere between, in the UK or Europe, equivalent of £60 to £70 for one that hasn't been tinkered with, is in fairly good condition. That's kind of the price I would set. If you had a mint one in original box with manuals, I would expect to carry a premium about £30, but not much more. Now, I've seen these units up in the UK for about £150 plus, but to be honest, that's just wishful thinking by the person who's selling it. Maybe someone out there might buy it, but to be honest, that's too much for one of these units. £100 tops for an FB-01 in absolutely cracking mint condition with all the manuals, etc. So if you're paying any more than that, don't. And the last one for this section comes from User333, and I haven't heard from User333 for a while because He is a fairly regular commenter on the channel, and he writes, "Hi, Music Tech Guy. If you showcase some new Roland gear, just not holding up photos, joining your Patreon site will be the go. I haven't joined Patreon for anyone, but in 5 years' time, that should change. I'm starting to watch less TV and less TV now." So this was in response to a video I did on coronavirus, what else, which was sort of the beginning of March when the whole sort of coronavirus started flaring up. Now, this is kind of my position, which I've responded to. Hi, user 3333. Thanks for the heads up on your criteria for Patreon support. Now, while I am a complete sucker for new equipment to add to the collection, there is a limit to the amount I can purchase, and that's purely because, unlike some other channels at this point in time, I'm not supplied with equipment by any of the manufacturers, so I don't get any kickbacks from a manufacturer from giving something a good review or a bad review, and I'm not being supplied with any equipment to do any reviews on. So where I'm reviewing equipment, it's because it's something I can see me using. So that's the first thing. It's I can use that equipment in the stuff I do, or I believe it's deemed worthy of a place in my collection of synthesizers and vintage gear. All equipment is purchased by me with my own funds, so there is a limit to the amount of equipment I can purchase and review on the channel. And again, I'm not going to review equipment if I don't see any need or any... If I can't use it, I'm not going to review it. It's as simple as that. Okay, so, you know, if manufacturers want to get in touch and provide me with equipment to review, then, you know what, I'll do my best and honest and give it an honest review. But I'm not going to just go and buy manufacturer's equipment just because it's shiny and does whizzy things, because I think there are other things out there that also do whizzy things and probably do whizzy things in a very similar way. So, you know, I have to see the benefit of it. That's kind of where I'm coming from. So as the channel grows, if manufacturers do want to give me equipment, then, you know, I'll be open to have a conversation with the manufacturer about the equipment. So really, it's kind of a case of chicken and egg at the moment. In order to grow the channel, I need to be reviewing both old and new equipment, and I also need to acquire the equipment to review, so I need to either borrow it, so one of my friends has bought it and I can prize it away from them. Now, you guys know, you know, if you get a new piece of equipment, what's the first thing you do? You rip the box open, you put it into your equipment rack, and you then sit there and play with it incessantly for several weeks, trying to work out how this thing works. Okay, so for me to be able to pry something away from someone just after they bought it is not really going to happen. I do know friends of mine who have got the Groove Box, which is sort of the MC707, and I have to be honest and say at the moment they are so engrossed in their Groove Box. The whole concept to me was sort of whipping around their house and say, not that I can whip around their house at the moment because we're all in lockdown, but if you get the drift, me going around their house and saying, right, I want to borrow your... And then basically we'll be saying, yes, John, go forth and multiply. So if you want to see more equipment and equipment bought quicker, then the simple answer is go across to Patreon, support me on Patreon, and as the kitty grows, then I can sort of start investing in some other equipment to do reviews on the channel. Although I must be honest to say most of the Patreon kitty will probably go to some more legacy stuff that needs to be preserved, like this beauty down here, which you can't see.